Hello, I'm Gilde Flores, music producer and composer. I'm here to talk about a cue that I created using We Sound Humans mariachi library. If you're looking at this here, I actually have the contact version up in front of me. I highly suggest to go watch other videos and demos to listen and see how this works, how everything is tweakable, and everything is divided into sections. So you basically have full control of the cues and there's separate voicings. For the sake of this video though, I'm not going to use the contact version. I've went ahead and taken the time to convert all the MIDI into audio and really for the sake of RAM. So I'm going to go ahead and play this cue in full. Then I'll come back and talk about how and why I used what I used. Wow, as you can hear, the authenticity of it, the organics of it, everything was just perfect. To tell you real quick about the actual project, I'm actually scoring an HBO Max upcoming comedy. It's a 10-episode series. And in that, I'm working a specific cue that I can't really say much about it since it's still in Go and I just can't talk about it. But I can tell you about the cue that I used this on. It was based in Mexico. The characters are in Mexico. It's more of like a comedic scene. We're running around, chasing each other. So it had to have that standout comedic vibe to it. So being that it's in Mexico and throughout the episode, you'll see different types of mariachis. So I thought the best thing to do was to have this played in mariachi form. And of course, being that I was scoring about an episode a week, I didn't have the luxury of getting a session set up, getting them in there and getting it recording and whatnot. So I heard about mariachi. I went over to We Sound Human, listened to about probably 4 to 5 seconds of it and just purchased it. So this is what we got. So being that was a comedy running around, it was a really short cue. It was a bit different than I usually start. I usually start out with melodies or chord progression, something to start writing with. So on this one particular, I went ahead and went through the string section and kind of see what I could listen to and whatnot. And is again, excuse me, you'll notice that everything's kind of broken up and it's from being rendered and bounced into audio. So it still does its purpose. So I'll show you the strings. And now I'll show you the guitarron, which is basically the bass instrument of the mariachi with the strings. As you can hear, it sounds very realistic. It's something else. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the horn section now. I'll add that to the guitarron, the strings, and the horns, and we get this. You'll hear that brass that I added at the end for the stinger there wasn't from this library. It was actually a VST. So that kind of give you an idea of like the authenticity of a live musicians, samples of that and a VST. But again, this is a working version, so it's not perfectly cleaned up. The final version, I went through and made sure everything, the attacks and crossfades and everything was where it needed to be. But since this is a working version, not everything is perfect on this. And with that said, I did actually duplicate the other version because it was tied to time code and had the video and I couldn't show any of that. So I thought just to duplicate the project and break it down in this format. So with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and show you the guitar section. This is made up of the guitars and the vihuela. And this is basically the rhythm section of it and really gives it what it needs. And let's go and hear the guitarron, the guitar section, strings, and trumpets. That there is the traditional mariachi section. Another element that I really loved adding was which gives it that human touch is the actual gritos. And there are plenty to work with, but on these particular ones, I remember hitting the keys, listening through, and I happened to run into something that when I looked up, I noticed the actor's mouth was going with it. So I immediately just printed it and left it as is. But here's a little bit of that on its own. And it really sealed the deal on that scene. So all that said, that is the mariachi section. The next three elements I added were basically just to tie it in to make it feel like it was part of the rest of the episodes or the actual series, which I did a lot more of the drums, bass, guitars. So let me just show just a little bit of the bass by itself. Let me add the guitarron. So it basically gave it some bottom end. And this next part I added was a piano, and that was really just for comedic purposes. And I'm just going to show you a little section. You'll know exactly what I'm saying. Last section I added was a drums. Really nothing fancy, anything really out of the norm. Maybe a ska type feel to it, but let's go and listen to a piece of that. Okay, and that's, of course, the bass, the drums, and the piano are not part of the actual library. Those were just additions for textures that I added. And let me go ahead and play it all one time now that I broke everything down, kind of hear everything in context. And that was mariachi. That, again, this library is something that you definitely want to have in your arsenal. Even if you don't think you'll need it, it's a very good tool to have. All the elements separated. You can be creative with it. Like I said, it's totally tweakable. Highly recommend going and checking out the audio demos and the visuals, and just get familiar with it, because it's definitely something you want to have. And you can find more of my work on my website, gildeflores.com. You can check me out on Instagram at Gilflow Productions. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you found this helpful. All the best.